Hi there, welcome to this build of a 45-inch wingspan Quiver. Now the Quiver we're building from a great set of plans which we downloaded from the OuterZone website. Now we've got to a stage in this build where we've more or less done all of the building. You can see in front of me we've got the tail assembly and it's nicely covered. We've got the wings finished which are covered. Fuselage we haven't covered yet, but it's complete, and we haven't covered it yet because I want to get the control equipment, the servos, the radio and the battery installed first. There's no point in limiting our access until we really need to, and covering it will limit our access. Now the radio gear, which is the battery, the transmitter and the servos, we can move around within the fuselage to help us get the best CG. Now there's a CG specified on the plans, and we need to meet this sweet spot when we've got this completely finished without adding any extra weight. We don't want to put lead in the nose or lead in the tail to try and balance it. The last thing we want to do is increase the weight of this aeroplane. So what we're going to do is we're going to mock this up now without the radio equipment, because the radio equipment we can move and we can put wherever we want. So we're going to mock this up with everything that we can't move. So the engine is there on the front. It's set now in stone. We can't move it. We've got the landing gear, the wheels, they can't be moved. The tailplane, obviously, that's got to go at the back. It can't be moved. Now, once we've got this mocked up, we're going to see where the CG is naturally falling. And if, for example, it's hitting this sweet spot, so the plane is nicely balanced, ready for flight, then when we put this radio gear in, we want to make sure that it's all around this CG point here, so we don't alter the weight at all. If, for example, we find that the plane is really nose heavy, to reach this sweet spot without putting any extra weight in, we're going to put the radio gear and the battery behind the CG to bring that CG back to that central spot. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to mock it up, get everything fitted, like I said, except for the things that we can move. So I will do that now, and then we'll come back and we'll see where the CG is in relation to the points specified on the plans. Right, I've now got this all mocked up, everything that can't be moved, and over here we've got a pile of the radio gear which we can move. And this is always a really exciting stage for me in any build, because you not only get a really good idea of what the model is going to look like when it's finished, which is really exciting, but you can also tell, you can weigh it along with the radio gear and get an idea of how heavy this model is going to be. And I'm really pleased with how this is looking. So what's left to be done now is, or one of the things to be done now, is to put our fingers where the CG is going to be and see what it's like. Now that is really, really nose heavy, and that is probably in part down to the slightly larger engine. It's a 1.3 mils rather than the 0.75. The wheels are really light, so they're not going to be making much difference. They're as light as possible. And we must remember that we've still got quite a bit of covering to go on the back of the fuselage, but that could also be balanced by the covering on the front and the fuel proofing. We're going to use an epoxy, 30-minute epoxy with alcohol to fuel proof that front end. So these could actually balance out almost, perhaps add a little bit more weight to the tail. So what we need to do to get this to balance is we're going to need to distribute the battery, the receiver, the servos and the switch. We're going to need to distribute these fairly rearward of that CG. So we need to put them back as far as possible, really. Now, one of the things I was hoping that I could do with this, and it now seems apparent I can, is I was wanting to put the servos down here under the tailplane at the back of the fuselage. And I did this with my Diamond Demon build with one of the fuselage, with one of the servos anyway, where I put it back here. And it just makes a really nice positive short connection. And much rather that we put the servos back here than putting them up here where traditionally we feel they ought to go, and then having to put lead in the tail. Complete waste of time. So they're small micro servos, they're 9 grams, and I'll give the details of these when I actually install them. But what I'm going to do now is I've got all of these bits. I'm going to mock it up again with the battery and the radio gear and servos where I think would be a good location to get this CG spot on as specified on the plans, and we'll come back and see how that looks. Okay, so I've distributed the parts around. We've got the 2 servos, we've got a little bag of bolts here which are going to be for the horns. I haven't got the horns at the moment, but I might make some actually out of brass, some nice ones, so that'll add a little bit more weight. I've got I've got 2 clevises and a bit of wire here which will signify the linkage. We've got right at the back of the cabin here the battery, the radio and the switch. Now we have to remember that when I put the servos in, there's going to be a little bit of timber there, perhaps a little bit of spruce or something for the servos to screw into, a little bit of strengthening on the back of the fuselage, so there will be a few more grams added there that we haven't at the moment. So let's just see how this balances out. Now that we can work with. That looks pretty good. I think I'm just on the CG there, and that looks to be, to my mind anyway, looks to be balancing quite nicely. And if we find that once we've got the covering on, and once we've got the covering on the tail, and the extra bits of wood down here for the servos, if we find that it's too tail heavy, then we've got a huge distance that we can move that battery forward to get more weight into the nose if needed. And we're also going to need to put a little bit of balsa. If I bring this up close here, hopefully we can see. We're going to need to put a little bit of balsa and perhaps ply here for the switch, which we've got just up in the top there. The radio probably go on this bulkhead, but we'll need to secure around here a little bit of an area to hold that battery. So everything we're going to be doing now is going to be adding weight to the rear, and that balance is really, really nice. So I'm quite pleased about that, and I think we can work with this. I think once I've got the servos installed in the tail, I will probably do this exercise again just to make sure that I haven't added too much there, and that we need to perhaps bring the switch and the radio forward, but I don't think so, because we have got that movement of the battery. And if I take the battery out, and we can move that right up into the front here, and that will really bring the weight forward. Yeah, you see, I'm just losing stuff off the back now. So you can see this has been a really valuable exercise so far. Well, whenever I build a model, I'm always fascinated by the weight. How heavy is it, or how light is it? I mean, at the end of the day, this model will be as heavy or as light as it is. There's nothing we can do at this stage, or very little we can do, to alter that other than not adding lead at the end. But I'm going to weigh it now. I've got a pair of kitchen scales. They're quite nice, accurate scales, and I'm just going to tear this kitchen roll onto there so we get 0, and then we'll balance the model on top of it and see what weight we get. So if we just put that on there now, and we just, right, we've got the 0, and we'll see what weight we can get with this. Like I say, very little we can do at this stage to alter it, but I just find it interesting really. Right, well that's 504 grams. Flicking over to 5, so 504, 505 grams. And the chances are we could add another 100 grams to this with the covering and some of the timber work. Hopefully not that much, but like I say, it doesn't really alter anything knowing this, but just something that always fascinates me. Well, as I said earlier, I always find this a really interesting, fascinating stage of a build, and it's really useful to do, and hopefully you can see the benefits of mocking it up to work out where we put those final components in the build. So I'm going to draw this video to a close now, and in the next video we're going to be getting those servos in, we're going to be getting the battery in and really pulling this together so that it's ready to start covering that fuselage and getting the windscreen in and the dashboard and really start to put it together. Thanks very much for watching.